Hello and welcome to another Fortnight on the Isle video, my bi-weekly update series. As you know, the title and thumbnail kind of make pretty clear and obvious. Yet again, back on my habit of basically forgetting these videos are a thing, that this series is a thing, or that I need to prepare these videos ahead of time until literally right beforehand. It's been a crazy fortnight yet again. I say this all the time, but it is definitely the truth. My windshield got replaced over the last couple weeks, so that is a good thing to have happened. Thankfully, that worked out fine. It was definitely my craziest work week that I've had in a very long time this week. I also got sick literally right after recording the last one of these videos, so I had to recover from that over about a week of time. That wasn't very fun. And as a result of kind of all these crazy things kind of happening, I'm starting to fall behind on a handful of projects. Namely, that a ton of book binge videos I still have notes to write for, and those have been waiting for like a month or more since I got some of those planned and organized. There's still many episodes that I've had recorded for a little while that are awaiting editing. Review writing is something that's taking quite a bit of time. It's taking forever, a lot longer than I feel like it should be. And over last weekend, while I was still not in any shape to be recording videos and didn't really feel like editing very many of them, I finally got my new workstation PC basically entirely set up now. In fact, this is the first video that I'm recording and editing on the new PC, which is pretty nerve-wracking, but it's nice to look over at my monitors over there and see that the temperature of my CPU especially is still in the low 40s as opposed to the 80s like it almost always is when recording on the old workstations. That is such a relief. It's really nice to see that editing and everything has been quick for some of the other stuff that I've already started to work on, and I'm getting used to Windows 11 a little bit quicker than I originally thought I would, which is also I sure hope all of this works as intended over the long run. I've still got a couple things that I still got left to do. I got my Stream Deck mostly worked out. In fact, it's actually a little bit of a better setup than I had before, which is nice, but I still have some things to work on with that. And of course, some other technicalities as well. But none of that is what you are actually here for. I've rambled a little bit long enough for the beginning of this video. Let's talk about the bi-weekly reading with a couple of exciting things to announce. One, namely, first off, I'm finally finished with Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I finished this basically over that first weekend after the last one of these videos. Instead of taking 2 more weekends to finish the book out, I only took the 1 weekend plus Monday and then a tiny bit of the morning on Tuesday to finish it out while I was a little bit sick. It was actually kind of a fever dream to be reading Infinite just while I was sick, especially if you know what happens in the final chapter surrounding Don Gately. There's a lot of fever dream type stuff going on in the book there, so that was a funny irony to experience in my real life, but it was an intriguing end, a chapter, the final chapter that I enjoyed, but found myself rather disappointed by in terms of there being literally no climax or resolution for any of the major storylines, and definitely not for any of the minor ones. That was something I definitely found myself being disappointed and mildly upset by. If you want to know kind of the details of how I felt about the ending of this book, you can actually check out the 5th and final reading diary that I did for the book, which just came out, I believe, on this most recent Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, was when that video actually released. Um, Although those diary videos that I do on these books are often spoiler filled, I do always have a spoiler free section at the beginning, no matter how long or short they may be. But this final reading diary for Infinite Jest had a spoiler free section at the beginning where I talked about my impressions of the ending and kind of some of my complaints around it. And then I also had like a little wrap up spoiler free section at the end as well. So I would say out of that 47-minute video, I would guess like 15 or so minutes of that was probably spoiler free, maybe even a little bit more than that. So if you want to know my detailed thoughts on the end of this book, even without the spoilers, you can check out that video and just watch the spoiler-free segments, which are in the timestamps labeled as spoiler-free. So you can definitely check that out if you want to know more. Overall, I really enjoyed much of the book, and it has some of my favorite sections that I've ever read in fiction, but there were some things that I wasn't exactly loving over the process of reading it, while reading it at various points, which I've talked about in all of the diaries. But most especially, I'm just kind of disappointed that there wasn't any real true resolution. That was something that I would have liked to see a bit more of. With that being said, I did also, work on a couple other different reading projects because that only took that first weekend. I have, in the time since the last one of these, not quite finished The Failures, but I'm actually getting pretty close to it. So I read, I'm pretty sure, all of part 3 since the last one of these Fortnite on the Owl videos, and this morning, at the time that I'm recording on Friday the 16th, I have started part 4, and I'm a not insignificant part of the way through it. I was hoping to get a little bit further, then my mind started to wander a little bit. There was plenty of revelations and stuff that have been happening in part 4 so far that have been really cool, but that I've needed to think about a little bit. I'm really excited to finish this. I'll almost certainly have this finished, if not by the end of the weekend, then by the end of this coming Monday. So very close to done. One of my favorite books of the year so far, and I don't anticipate the ending really changing that. Maybe it will. Maybe it'll surprise me in all the wrong ways, but I've really enjoyed my time with The Failures, and honestly, at this point, I can still say I highly recommend it, but we'll see what happens as I finish it. I'll update you guys on the next Fortnite on the Isle video about that, because yeah, the next Fortnite on the Isle will be the very beginning of September, and the reading wrap up and TBR video won't be quite out then. So, an it'll be an adventure finishing the book. It's been a great reading experience, even though it's taken a little bit longer than I've wanted it to, but I've been very happy with it overall. Next up, I did start a short story collection, that being Night Shift by Stephen King. I haven't gotten very far through it. I read that introduction by, what's his bucket, some other author of the time that the book came out that wasn't very good, honestly. The introduction was very mediocre. But then I read the foreword by King himself, which was actually quite good. I really liked the foreword. And then I've read the first story so far, which is Jerusalem's Lot, which, in case you didn't know, and in case you can't infer based on the title, is related to the novel Salem's Lot. It is a prequel to it. But the format of Jerusalem's Lot was actually pretty good. I wasn't expecting the epistolary format, and I was not expecting it to explore some of the topics that it did in the way that it did. I was also surprised and really respect King for the decision that he did to kind of age the English, the prose that he used in it, because of this, the epistolary format, to a degree that actually felt authentic, even up to and including some letters he used within the story as well. Some other sections that utilized even older English, in which he did some out of date English conventions that we don't use anymore, such as capitalizing all nouns. There were sections where every noun was capitalized, which is not something that English has done for a very long time, but the attention to detail in Jerusalem's Lot as a story was really great, and it makes me even more excited to get to the end of the collection, where the second to last story is the sort of sequel. It's like an epilogue to Salem's Lot, so I'm excited for that. But I haven't gotten to read much more of it since. I was hoping to get some bits of it read over the past couple weeks, but haven't found the time or the desire to, quite frankly. Not because of the collection, obviously, because I've really enjoyed what I have read from it, but more so on account of having other things to do, and also being sick and other stuff, so I haven't really been in the mood to do a whole lot of reading at certain points in time. But I am excited to continue this and probably finish it over this fortnight, over the rest of the month. The final thing that I'm going to talk about in the bi-weekly reading for this Fortnight on the Isle is that I did not just start, but I also finished Uzumaki by Junji Ito, 3-volume originally collection. Very good. I would say that out of the 19 official chapters, not counting the 20th, lost chapter that they include in this deluxe edition of it, out of the 19 chapters, I would say most of those, probably 15 of those, are definitely in that good to phenomenal, or sorry, that great to phenomenal section, or segment of basically my tastes. And then there were a couple of misses, chapters that I didn't love too much. There were 3 chapters in particular that I can think of that I wasn't super into. Obviously, there were a handful more that were good, that were fine, but there were just great sections. It started off super strong. That everything that would have been the equivalent of volume 1 in this was phenomenal. Volume 3 was off to a little bit of a bumpy start, but ended fantastically. Volume 2 also had one of my favorite sections of the entire manga, while also having, I'm pretty sure, two of my least favorite chapters manga. So it wasn't all perfect, but what was great was definitely very, very, very great. Like, sincerely, the first several chapters are fantastic. Last two chapters are amazing. The first couple chapters of Volume 2 are absolutely splendid. Most of these sections of different body horror that Ito utilizes throughout Uzumaki is great. There are some portions of the body horror that didn't really hit for me so hard or didn't really work for me as much as I would have liked them to. But overall, the manga was great and really kind of solidified my decision to occasionally read a little bit of manga now and again. Not necessarily so that I can incorporate it into the channel necessarily, because I don't think that manga is going to be a thing that I cover very often on the book bench or anything like that. It's just something that, after spending 3.5 months on Infinite Jest in particular, over the rest of this year, I do want to spend a little bit of time off from reading some crazy stuff. I'm going to be reading Lord of Chaos in Wheel of Time here pretty soon, starting in September. Definitely in September, I'm going to be starting to read that, and that'll take, a long time, doing the weekly reading diary type thing for it again, as I do with all the Wheel of Time books. But other than that, most of my reading plans for the rest of the year are relatively shorter or easier books to read. And I want to make manga a little bit more of that as well, because I'm trying to recover from just spending 3.5 months on Infinite Jest. That was absolutely absurd and brain busting and took a lot of time and energy. So I want to kind of regain that energy by reading some shorter, simpler, easier things. So I've got Goodnight Poon Poon on my list for manga to read over the course of the rest of the year, basically. I don't know how quick I'll read it. I don't know when I'll start it or anything more specific like that, but it is on my docket to start a little bit sooner than I was anticipating, because I do want to have a little bit of manga to kind of fall back on as an easier reading option, as I'm kind of recovering from a couple of these bigger books over the last couple of. So that is bi-weekly reading. Let's talk about the bi-weekly writing now, which doesn't really have a whole bunch to announce for the moment, but I will announce that, well, no writing on the Reign of Ash really happened over the course of the last 2 weeks. In fact, I haven't even really thought about it, for the most part, because of what we'll talk about here in just a moment. Kind of the same thing with blogs. I didn't write anything for any blogs or reviews or anything like that, or non-book reviews specifically. But it's fine. I haven't really thought about any of those things, but that's because all of my writing energy for the last couple weeks has gone into book review writing, ostensibly for Goodreads, which I recently discovered actually all 3 of the reviews that I'm writing right now will likely not even be able to exist in full on Goodreads in the first place anyway, because they are too long, too many characters. Because if you don't know, Goodreads has a 15,000 character limit on their reviews, so all of these reviews are actually too long already, which is quite amazing. Anyway, I should stop beating around the bush here. You might remember in the last Fortnight on the Isle that I talked about having written 500 words for, like, kind of placeholder reviews, saying that I really loved The Passenger and Stella Maris by Cormac McCarthy, but that a full review would come for each of those when I got to finish writing them. But then I also commented that I had actually written about 3,000 words between those 2 reviews by the time the last one of these came out. Well, I've written 3,200 more words as of this point in time for those 2 reviews, again for The Passenger and for Stella Maris. Currently sitting at the moment with 5,000 total words for The Passenger, with 2 sections left to write. That shouldn't be too hard to finish up this week, I would say. And then Stella Maris has 2,200 words, which I'm pretty sure is basically the same amount, if not the exact same amount it was last Fortnight. I haven't really touched that one quite yet, because I've been working on The Passenger. 4 sections still left to write on Stella Maris. So these 2 are still in pretty good states. I'm actually really happy with how they're coming out, even though I was pretty meh on The Passenger for a little bit. I think it will come out all right, especially after I get a revision pass on the review. But let's go ahead and just say that the Stella Maris review is currently at over half of the character limit of the Goodreads limit for reviews. So so I don't think that full review will be able to fit within Goodreads. I'm probably going to have to cut out much of the spoiler body section of that review and then just say that you can find the rest of it elsewhere. Same thing for The Passenger. That one is actually already like 10,000 characters over the limit, so I'm definitely not going to be able to include the spoiler body section. But I should be able to include the introduction and conclusion, basically. Um, so we'll kind of see how that goes. I think what I'm planning to do for my actual reviews of those two books on this channel is I don't know if I'm going to do a normal book binge review for The Passenger and Stella Maris. I think what I'm going to end up doing is actually just reading these reviews that I'm writing for them, ostensibly again for Goodreads, but reading them in full and making them spoiler reviews on the channel. Obviously, there are the non-spoiler sections, so you could still go and listen if you wanted to watch the video and not read the Goodreads versions, the introduction and the conclusion of each of those without getting any spoilers in there. But I don't know if I could possibly say what it is I want to say about those books in my normal book binge spoiler format in a spoiler-free way. So I just want to read those as kind of scripts, the way that I've done blogs on the second channel. So that's something that I'm planning on doing. And because those full reviews won't be able to fit on Goodreads in the first place anyway, I want for them to exist somewhere. And currently my website is still kind of missing in action. I haven't touched anything with that in a little bit too long. In fact, it's been down for basically all year for me to make edits on it that I have proceeded not really to make very many edits on in the time since. Oops. So I want those reviews to exist somewhere, so it's probably going to be on this channel as a result. It's a very similar story for the 2,500 word review that I have written so far for Infinite Jest, with 10 sections left to write. So that one's probably going to end up being very long as well. It might end up being a longer review than The Passenger somehow, which is kind of surprising, but there's a very real chance that that happens. 2,550 words written so far for that, for the Infinite Jest review, and it is already right at that 15,000 character limit. It's at like 14,900 and something characters. So like if I wanted to release an Infinite Jest review on Goodreads, I would have to release the current version right now, and like that doesn't have half of what I'm to say on it. It hasn't even gotten into any spoiler material yet, so I have no idea how I'm going to be able to cover that one on Goodreads. I might just have to do a very, very short version of it. Basically like just the introduction, maybe even with just the conclusion attached to it, and say, yeah, if you want the whole body section of this review, then it'll be a similar thing. Originally, I wasn't sure if I was going to do, you know, a video version of the Infinite Jest review, script-wise, and record it for the channel, but I think I'm going to have to, again, because it's going to be too long to actually Goodreads. And as such, I discovered while talking about Infinite Jest, you know, both in this video and also in that spoiler diary, or that reading diary, I suppose I should say, the spoiler-free sections of that diary actually say basically what I want to say about not just chapter 28 of the book, but the whole book in general. Wrapping up my experience with that in a spoiler-free format that isn't necessarily too far from what I would say in a spoiler-free book binge episode. So I'm not 100% sure if I'm actually going to do a spoiler-free book binge review for Infinite Jest on the channel. I might just. I'm still undecided on that front, but I'm definitely going to record this script version of it and make that a video on the channel. Definitely, because I'm very proud of what that has become and the way that that review is going so far as well. It'll need some revisions, of course, just like the other two, but I'm still very happy with it so far. And because it's so long, it won't be able to exist on Goodreads. I want it to exist on YouTube so that people can still be able to get my much deeper and more structured thoughts and review out there. So that's all I need to say on the bi-weekly writing. This video is going to be incredibly long just because of all of that section. I'm sorry to waste your time that way, but let's talk about the coming releases on the channel over the next couple of weeks. But first, let me actually jump back to last Sunday, where I released a little book binge bonus episode introducing The Barrow King by Christopher Rocchio, which is a short story that does not exist within the Sun Eater universe that anybody can read right now if they want to. The magazine that it has been included in is actually free. The issue that it is included in is free, so if you want to read that story as a sort of introduction to Rocchio's work, or if you're not a huge fan of Sun Eater, like you started it, but you weren't necessarily super into it, I recommend giving this a shot to kind of see if the more fantasy sword and sorcery-esque type of vibes of that world are more your speed. So I talked about that for about 7 minutes, just a short little bonus episode last week. I recommend you check that out if you haven't already. Otherwise, the next 2 weeks also have a handful of videos planned. Of course, just as always, this Tuesday on the 20th, I have a semi-spoiler review for New Spring by Robert Jordan. So what I mean by semi-spoilers, most of my reviews are spoiler-free, or if they include spoilers, it's in a specific section that I denote and make very clear so that you can skip them if you haven't read the book. But I do spoiler-free reviews because I don't really like talking about spoilers. New Spring because it is a prequel and because it also exists as kind of like having 3 different places that you can read it, depending on where you're at with the Wheel of Time as a full series. It kind of made certain aspects a little hard to talk about, especially where the early portion of the series is concerned, like, say, the Eye of the World. So I call that semi-spoiler review because if you haven't read at least through the first 5 books of the series, you should not watch that review because that's where I've read through the series and that's the context that I talked about in. Unlike most of my other Wheel of Time reviews, where even if you haven't read up to the point that I've reviewed them, in the series, you could basically still watch those, and even if I reference something from an earlier book, it's going to be out of context in such a way that, who knows. This one's a little bit more blurry on that topic, but that review will be coming out on Tuesday. I'm excited for that video. I really enjoyed that book, so I'll be curious to see how many dislikes I get from people who aren't really New Spring stans. This Thursday, on the 22nd, will be the most complex books ever published according to the internet, a little special video that I made, a little bit more experimental, where I basically went on the internet, I perused a bunch of different blogs and websites and other places that kind of ranked some of the most complex books ever published, and talked about them, both in the context of the, at the time, one book that I had read and one book that I was in the middle of, at the time that I recorded it, and then several other books that some of my friends had read, and they told me their experience on so that I could talk about them in a little bit of context, and then some other books that seem kind of complicated that I'm interested in. So there's a bunch of different books on that list, but it's an experimental episode. I haven't read all those, so I can't really say for sure whether they're the most complicated books ever or not, but that video will be coming out on Thursday nonetheless. Next Sunday on the 25th will be the finale episode, I guess, of Short Story Sundays. The true finale was at the end of July when I talked about The Sandman by E.T.A. Hoffman. But this Sunday will be a video where I talk about why I discontinued Short Story Sundays. So it's a little bit more of an informal video where I don't refer to any notes. I don't have any script or anything like that. I'm just going through the thoughts that I had running in my head for the month or two, before making that video. So it's a long video. It's actually really long. I was expecting to go into it, record it, and come out of it with like a 15, maybe 20-minute recording to turn into a 10, maybe 15-minute video, talking about why I discontinued the series, Short Story Sundays. It turned out being a 55-minute recording that became basically a 50-minute video. So it ended up being quite long, but basically none of that material I felt justified in cutting out. Because even when I'm a little bit repeating myself, I'm talking about those different things in a different context and in the context of further points that I've made and kind of, going in a circular format where I'm referring to some of the same stuff again and again in just the way where it's more like a structure. It's a weird structure that I managed to come up with even without referring to notes. Like I said, it might be a little bit repetitive in certain moments or in some ways, but I felt like that video was worth making, and I felt like because I took dive to make that series in the first place, I felt like I needed to actually make a video explaining why I stopped making it, so that if there was anybody who was actually really a fan of that series, I apologize for discontinuing it, and then also explaining why to hopefully make it understandable to some of the people who miss it. And to also ask for suggestions on how I might be able to bring back talking about short stories in a different way, maybe in a different version of Short Story Sundays, or in the book binge to some degree, depending on what you guys suggest. So I recommend you go check out that video if you're somebody who is into Short Story Sundays. Next Tuesday, on the 27th, will be a review of The Long Walk by Stephen King. So, talking about that second book that he published under the name of Richard Bachman, one that I held rather highly, in rather high regard, I should say, back when I first read it, because it was the second Stephen King book that I'd ever read, and I loved it. I didn't quite like adore it the same way this time with a little bit more Stephen King under my belt, but I do think it is a very good book nonetheless. And I talk about, all of the specific spoiler-free stuff in that review, so check that out next Tuesday. Finally, next Thursday on the 29th will be another top 5 list talking about some horror books that I want to read. So that list will be out on Thursday, yet another relatively short one, kind of like the top 5 dystopian books that I want to read, which came out the Thursday before last. So a couple weeks ago, basically. On the second channel, just continuing Kingdom Hearts 2 Let's Play on the 17th and the 19th is not correct. I don't know why I have that written down. It will be on the 23rd and the 30th. I have no clue how those dates got messed up. So let me actually fix that a little bit. Wait, is that correct? Am I going crazy? No, that's right. 23rd and the 30th is when those videos will be coming out. Those videos specifically being Kingdom Hearts 2 Let's Plays number 4 and number 5. So those episodes. There is a small chance, I will confess, there is a small chance that 1 or 2 of those end up being delayed. I didn't realize until pretty recently that I haven't edited them yet. I thought I had got at least through episode 4 edited while I was sick. Turns out I did not. I have not had the time over the last couple weeks since then to get any more editing on those done quite yet because of being sick and some of the other projects that I've got going on. So I gotta get a little bit of work done on those. Hopefully this weekend I should be able to have the time. In fact, I'm going to try to get at least those 2 episodes done today, the day that I'm recording this, so that I don't have to worry about them being delayed. In terms of entertainment talk, I do have a little bit more to say this fortnight than I did last fortnight, where I did not get anything done last fortnight. This time, like I said, have a little bit to say. Real redundant, I know, I'm sorry. I haven't actually had time to play any games over the last couple weeks because of setting up my PC and other stuff like that. But at the time that I'm recording this on Friday, tomorrow on Saturday, Josh and I are going to be getting back to playing Kingdom Hearts 2. It's been a few weeks since we did this. A few weeks ago, I had to back off because I was actually way too busy with some other projects that I had to get done first. Then 2 weeks ago, I was sick. Then last week, I was also still feeling a little sick, not really wanting to talk or anything like that, as well as taking care of my PC. So it's been a few weeks without playing the game. I need to get a few more episodes backed up again because I'm only recorded through episode 6, so I'd like to get a little bit more of a backlog on there so that I can get more of those edited over the future. The main thing that I want to talk about in Entertainment Talk this time around, though, is that I actually went to watch a movie again with Lane. We went and watched Deadpool and Wolverine, which I know there's a lot of different opinions on this movie online. I will say that for somebody, talking about myself, of course, who has not watched the first 2 Deadpool movies, even though I want to. I know people say skip the second one for some reason. I don't care. I'm going to watch them eventually. And hasn't watched Logan, which is one that I actually kind of regret. That's a decision that I've regretted making since watching this movie. Because now, basically, the things that I hadn't been spoiled about in that movie, I was spoiled about because of Deadpool and Wolverine, which I basically expected going in. But now I want to watch Logan even more. Those 3 movies I haven't watched, but I still watched this one. Weird decision, don't judge me. It was basically just an opportunity for Lane and I to go to a movie and just have a fun time and laugh our butts off, which of course we did because Deadpool and Wolverine was fantastic. I loved basically every minute of it. Is it a messy movie? Yes, of course it is. There's plenty of problems, especially on like the sort of plotting and the villain side of things, but like, did I really care? I absolutely did not care. I had a really fun time. I laughed enough. I laughed way too much, quite frankly. It was hilarious. I thought it was great, so I had a really fun time. In fact, I plan to write a review for that on Letterboxd, but because of having these 3 book reviews that I'm still working on for The Passenger and Stella Maris and Infinite Jest, and now I have a review that I need to write for Uzumaki since I just finished that today, that means that I have like 5 reviews on my backlog, which is actually starting to become a problem. I need to get those first 3 reviews done so that I can actually get caught up on review writing stuff. So that's something that's on my plate. Otherwise, the only thing that I have to say on Entertainment Talk is that this coming weekend on the 24th, this Saturday, I have a friend who's going to be going to an Orbit Culture, an Orbit Culture concert with me. So this is one of my favorite metal bands currently working. So Doom's going to be coming with me. He's actually flying from Washington to Salt Lake so that we can go see this concert together on Saturday. So that'll be fun. I've got my little concert earplugs to be able to wear there and hope that they work. My first set that I've ever had. So I've not been to very many concerts, and this will be my first metal concert. So this will certainly be an adventure. This is part of the reason why I've got to get some video editing done this weekend on the Kingdom Hearts 2 front, and got to get some videos recorded, especially this weekend, because I'm not going to be around next week to edit or record any more of those episodes. So that's something that I've got to get done. As for music talk, not a whole lot that I've got to talk about today, just a few singles and one album. The first single that I want to shout out is called Shadow Dancer by a band called Vicious Rain. These guys are kind of a breakout hit at the moment. I think they've only released 5 singles, I think, but I may have only actually listened to 4 of them. But Shadow Dancer was another good single. All of these singles have been pretty good, at least the 4 that I know I've listened to. I don't remember if I've listened to the 5th one. I'm expecting these guys to drop an album here at some point, maybe relatively soon, and I certainly hope so, because they're pretty good. And they've already got quite the force behind them for being, such a new band. So that's encouraging to see. Born of Osiris released a single called In Desolation that I thought was pretty good, on a similar, if not even greater level than the last couple of singles, so I was happy with that. All That Remains released another single called No Tomorrow. That was actually of pretty similar quality to the last single, which was already my favorite of those 2 singles. So the second and third singles have been pretty great, and the first one is even good, even if it's nowhere near the quality of the second and third one. So they're pretty good. All That Remains isn't exactly my style of metalcore, because classic metalcore isn't really my preferred style of the genre, but these 3 singles have been really good, so I'm actually looking forward to a full album from these guys. Starset released a new single called Toxic, which is not spelled the way that Toxic is normally spelled, but you'll find it if you search up Toxic or Starset in any streaming platform or YouTube or whatever. Single's pretty good. I think it's much better than Degenerate, and I think it's still not quite as good as Brave New World, but that's because Brave New World is just such an exceptional song. But yeah, Toxic was better than Degenerate, so I'm happy with that. The only album that I have to talk about this week was Left to Suffer, releasing an album called Leap of Death, which is a very strange and almost like kind of cool contrast, I suppose I should say, to their 2023 album, which was pretty brutal and heavy most of the way through, and this one actually had a few more melodies and actual clean choruses throughout. So the singles for Leap of Death before coming into this release, I just wasn't really super into, and I think part of that was because the context of the album is so different. When I think of Left to Suffer, I think of that concept, maybe not concept EP, but that EP that has tracks named after all the stages of grief. That EP, and then of course the 2020 album, which I think was called Feral. Those 2 are both very heavy releases, so this one to have a slightly more dynamic range to it is a little unexpected to some small degree, and also meant that the singles were actually a little bit more dynamic as well, and were like not what I associate with Left to Suffer in my brain. But the full album was pretty good. I think I'll listen to this one a couple more times. It's good. It has some of those really heavy Left to Suffer moments, while also having some nice clean contrast that I definitely wasn't expecting. But that is all for this Fortnight on the Isle. I've been talking for a very long time. This might even be the longest Fortnight on the Isle I've ever released. I apologize for keeping you for so long, but I really appreciate you for sticking through it and watching it, of course, if you did so. I'll be back, like I said, on Tuesday with that semi-spoiler review for New Spring, but if you don't check that out, I will be back on Thursday with that little bit more experimental video about complex books published according to the internet. So I hope you stick around for some of those videos. If not, that's totally fine too. I appreciate you for watching nonetheless. Thank you for watching, of course, and I'll be back in the next video.